first, we have a visitor here. Hey, bud, you want to say hi? Hello. Oliver wanted to make an appearance. You say hi, buddy? Yeah. Kisses. Thank you. Okay, bye. Hey there, I'm back. What do you guys think of this setup? I know it's vastly different from what you're used to seeing. The acoustics are probably a little different in here. I apologize for that. But I'm actually in my living room, which is actually decorated more along the lines with my personal style, which is a lot more mid-century mod with a mix of pop art. So I know it's really different. Thought I'd switch it up, but I'll probably go back to my usual setup for most of my videos. And I apologize if you can hear city noises outside. It is rush hour and there's just a lot going on out there. But anyway, since I started this channel, I've been taking a lot of recommendations from you guys in my comments about who you'd like to see me cover next, give my opinions on. And you guys have given me a lot of suggestions in terms of YouTubers I know of and YouTubers that I should check out. And one of the YouTubers a few of you mentioned was Taylor Nicole Dean. And I'd never heard of her. Apparently she's a pet tuber, and that is not even a thing I knew existed. But a few of you brought to my attention that she got sober within the past year and wanted my thoughts on her story. So I promised you guys I would look her up. I did. I am so glad I found her. I will say that I watched her story about her addiction and recovery. I watched her story about dating Jonny Craig, and then kind of passively watched a handful of her kind of pet tuby videos. So by design, I have not watched any videos related to any drama around her, particularly any drama that stemmed after she got sober and started talking about that. I believe there is some controversy or some disagreement about how she views recovery and sobriety and addiction. I think I saw somebody mention that there was some drama between her and the Rewired Soul. So that is not something I've dived into yet. That is something I'd like to dive into after this. But for now, I kind of want to give my commentary on her kind of coming out addiction story, primarily, and then maybe a little bit about the follow-up video about dating Jonny Craig, without my opinion being sort of tainted or biased by any coverage of drama that ensued afterwards, if that makes sense. So in Taylor's video called I'm a Heroin Addict, she talks about her addiction, how it came to be, how she became sober, and really how it all ties into this very toxic relationship she was in. In fact, I felt that her story focused maybe even more so on this relationship than it did on her addiction. And I'm well aware, not just from hearing other people's stories, but through my own experiences, that the relationships that we're in the times around our addiction and in recovery, those relationships have a very heavy impact on our addiction stories, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to completely divorce the two things. So I do understand that that was a necessary component to telling her story. But because she speaks so much about that relationship, I wanted to speak more to my similar experiences in terms of what it's like to date an addict, what it's like to become addicted to a substance in a relationship, what it's like to be placed in compromising situations because of relationships. And as I was watching these videos and taking notes and brainstorming what I wanted to talk about, there came to be just way too much in terms of wanting to lay out my similar experiences to everything she talked about, or just my commentary on what she talked about, and how this one relationship I was in kind of put me in a position that sort of catapulted me into my own addiction, as well as another relationship that contributed to a subsequent relapse, as well as another relationship with an addict while I was in recovery. And obviously you can tell it's just too much. I mean, that in and of itself could be a docu-series. And those are topics that I would love to cover down the line, and I've alluded to some of those in previous videos. But I really kind of wanted to boil this down to one topic for now. So as some of you know, I am an alcoholic in recovery. I have been sober for about 7.5 years now, and sobriety and recovery have everything to do with the kind of person I am today, how I deal with situations, what forms my opinions on a lot of the situations I talk about in my videos and in life in general. But one thing that I find to be interesting is how romantic relationships, particularly domestic live-in relationships, around addicts. One thing I find interesting is the dynamic in a romantic relationship, particularly when two people live together, when one or both of those people are addicted to a substance. Kind of the dangers that people put themselves and other people in, how kind of dysfunctionally dependent people become towards each other, and really kind of just how addiction wreaks havoc on these relationships. First, we have a visitor here. Hey, bud, you want to say hi? Hello. Oliver wanted to make an appearance. You say hi, buddy? Yeah. Kisses. Thank you. Okay, bye. This is a super quick reminder to like and subscribe if that's something you want to do. If that's not something you want to do, I'm sorry for the interruption. I'll shut up and start talking now. So, instead of talking about the relationships that I was in while I was struggling with active alcoholism, what I really want to focus on is my experiences in a relationship with somebody that was severely addicted to hard drugs, and the parts of Taylor's story that really touched home for me as somebody who was living in just such a toxic environment and trying to navigate an experience like that for the first time. And something that I want to make very clear, I really, as much as I encourage conversation in the comments, what I really don't want to happen is I don't want anybody to come to me and telling me what I should have done in these situations, what Taylor should have done in these situations. The truth is that hindsight is 20/20. I can look back at all of these situations and all of my relationships really, and with a clear head, lay out what I should have done at any given point in these relationships. What we're dealing with here, what I dealt with, what I gather Taylor was dealing with, is being in a situation that is so desperate that you are trying so hard to save somebody else's life, to keep yourself alive, that you're really just trying your best. And oftentimes our best is not the best for us or for other people. So bear in mind that my experiences, if I could go back, I would do a lot differently. But there was just so much about her story that sounded so similar to a lot of things that I experienced. So I kind of wanted to pull from her stories and tell you guys about what's happened in my life, just so that you can learn a little bit more about me, hear what really touched me from her story. And if there's anybody out there who has dealt with or is dealing with something similar, hopefully this can at least help you feel like you're not alone, and perhaps you have somewhere to reach out and get some help or at least some comfort. So there's just no way of going through Taylor's timeline of events and perfectly dovetail that with my timeline of events. These things just aren't linear across all people. So I do kind of want to go through some points that she brought up in her video, and just pull from my experiences and talk about what I experienced that felt similar. And I'm sorry if I'm sounding super redundant. I'm just trying to make sure that I lay this out in a way that is cohesive and properly sets the stage for you all. And for the purpose of anonymity, I am going to refer to my ex-boyfriend as RJ. RJ was somebody that I met through AA, that I met through friends within the AA community, friends that I went to treatment with, essentially friends that I felt safe with. Because to my knowledge, we were all sober, we were all recovering together, we were all getting sober around the same time. For that, I kind of felt like I had a connection with this person, RJ, and thus entered a relationship with him. And because I have a tendency to do so, he moved in with me pretty quickly, which at first I thought was great. You know, I was in a relationship, we were both sober, you know, there was never any alcohol around, which was my drug of choice. That's what I had a problem with. He had a problem with harder drugs, particularly heroin. And so I felt that I had a safe place in him and he had a safe place in me. And that was until a couple months into the relationship when things just started to seem funny. Some of his behaviors just didn't make a ton of sense. So here Taylor talks about where things started to seem a little bit off with her ex-boyfriend. She talks about him acting strange and waiting around. That was one thing that really just kind of struck a nerve, is the concept of this waiting game that we play with addicts in our life, which I do think is a direct result of the waiting game that they have to play, but that's something that's neither here nor there with this video. There were a couple of times where things just seemed a little off and unsettling for me, and I wouldn't realize at the time that these things that just made me feel a little bit uneasy were actually causing a lot more damage than I thought they were. I came to learn later on in this relationship that there was one particular neighborhood that my ex would frequent to buy drugs. So I'll just refer to that neighborhood as downtown for the sake of simplicity. But things would start off somewhat innocuous seeming. There was a time I can think of that my ex had to go downtown. I don't remember for what, but I want to say that he was supposed to be gone for like 30 minutes. I don't remember what he was supposed to be doing, but I certainly didn't think he was going to get drugs. But he was gone for, I believe, up to like 2 hours as opposed to the 30 minutes that he was supposed to be gone. And for a majority of these 2 hours, I couldn't get in touch with him by phone. So after about 45 minutes, an hour, I started becoming increasingly more and more worried until 2 hours later when he walked through the door. And obviously kind of shaken, I asked what had gone on. Knowing that he had a history with drugs, part of me wondered if he'd fallen off the wagon and that had something to do with this kind of secretive disappearance. But then anytime I wondered things like that, I would start to feel guilty. In this instance, he expressed to me that he had hopped the turnstile in the metro and got stopped by the metro police. So to kind of explain what that means, here in DC we have a subway system, and it is a crime to hop over the turnstile in lieu of paying your fare, which apparently he did frequently because he never really had much money on him. Why he never had money? He had so many reasons, but if we're being real with ourselves, it's because of drugs. But anyway, at this time, he said it was because he hopped the turnstile, the Metro Police stopped him, they had to hold him, question him, check to see if he had any warrants, and this was the reason he could not respond to me by phone, the reason that he was gone for so long, all of that. Something seemed not right to me, but what else could I do or say in that situation? So I let that go until there was another situation that involved going downtown. I got the opportunity to act in a very small kind of online commercial ad for this app. That is no longer, that's not the point. But I had a really good time. I got to meet new people. I was out shooting this commercial. My ex showed up with a couple of his friends towards the end of the shoot, just to meet up, say hi. The shoot ended at a bar. So his friends were there, his friends got a couple of drinks, and we all had a good time, and then decided to head out and head home. Sorry, I had to cut my camera, so I'm going to try to pick up where I left off. So RJ and I are at a bar where I was shooting my commercial. Mind you, at this point, I was about a year sober, and he didn't drink because he was sober too. We were there with my new friends, with a couple of his friends, and they were having drinks, but we didn't stay long, and we all took off. His friends took off with us, and we were heading towards the metro to head back home. So we went this way, his friends went this way, after everybody said their goodnights. And about halfway to the metro station that we needed to get to, he stopped and said, "Oh wait, I need to go catch up with my friend, he has my debit card." Mind you, this is the guy that didn't have enough money to pay for metro fare not too long ago. So I asked, why did your friend have your debit card? And he told me, oh, he forgot his at home. He's gonna pay me back. I let him borrow my debit card. I need to go get it back from him. So I've got to go downtown to meet my friend and get my debit card back. I remembered the last time he went downtown and the eerie feeling I got. But on top of that, I was a young woman in my 20s at night in a neighborhood that I don't live in. I didn't want to be alone if I didn't have to. So I said, okay, I'll come with you. We're just going to get your debit card from your friend. I'll go with you and we'll go home from there. And from there, he just started to get so overly combative with me. In a way that I didn't understand. And what happened next didn't entirely make sense. All I knew was that something was wrong. So we argued about whether or not I could come with him downtown to get his debit card, and ended up splitting ways. I was gonna head home. He was gonna go do what he was gonna go do. I remember getting to the metro station and my phone dying. So I just remember sitting there waiting for the train and just being so angry and disappointed that he'd left me alone. Somebody who should be concerned with helping to make sure that I'm safe. I'm alone in a different neighborhood with a dead phone. Awesome. And then somehow, after waiting several minutes for the train, as I was getting on, he showed up, didn't speak to me, got on the same train that I got on, still not speaking to me. We got off at the same station, heading home, and as soon as we got to our neighborhood, he just took off towards our apartment. And I was really distraught. I knew that something was wrong. I decided to pop into CVS. There was a young girl sitting on the corner who was presumably homeless. So while I was in CVS, I decided to pick her up some snacks and some juice. And I brought these things out to her. And it was funny because as I handed her these things, she said something like, "Thank you so much. Will you pray for me?" And I said to her, "Of course. I'll pray for you if you pray for me." And as I was walking away from this young woman, I heard her shout, "Wait, what am I praying for?" And I shouted back, "Just that I make it, just that we both make it." And immediately after that, this is really, really bizarre. It's bizarre to me. It's probably going to be bizarre to you. But as I'm walking away from this CVS and this young woman, some guy I'd never met kind of intercepted me and ran up to me. And he said, hey, you, do you know RJ? To which I said, yeah, I know who he is. Why? And he said, well, do you know who I am? And I said, no, I've never met you before. And he goes, well, I'm RJ's supplier. Why somebody would out himself that way to the girlfriend of one of his clients, I don't know. To this day, I do not understand. I don't know what that guy thought that he was going to get out of that interaction. But I don't even remember what I said to him. I sort of just brushed him off and went on my way and went home. And I don't really remember how our interactions went that night when I got home. My guess is probably that he'd gone to sleep and that I did shortly thereafter. And so that was all just kind of a long-winded way of kind of describing that feeling of waiting around knowing that something is wrong, but not knowing exactly what it is, not knowing how you should feel about it until things start to escalate. And so at this point, she says that now there's a drug dealer in her home, which apparently made her pretty uncomfortable. Oh, goodness. Drug dealers in the home. Where do I start? Okay, so I've got a couple of stories that relate to that. So my best friend, who is somebody I met through treatment, through the program, obviously somebody who is also in recovery for addiction, would occasionally come to visit. And there were a couple of times in particular that stand out as it relates to RJ's addiction and just makes me livid, because it is one thing for me to put my own sobriety at risk for a man, but the fact that I allowed this person to put my best friend at risk, it makes me livid with myself and with him. So my friend would come to visit. Ironically, when I told my best friend I was making a video about Taylor Nicole Dean and her relationship with Jonny Craig, she sent me this picture of her at the Warped Tour in 2009 and said, "That's the guy with his head on my shoulder," which is just some random fact that contributes nothing to this story, but is just a way of illustrating how small of a world we live in. Anyway, so my friend would come to visit, and I believe there was one day that I had to work. It must have been on a weekend because my friend didn't have to work and neither did RJ, but he couldn't hold a job through the course of our relationship, which was about a little less than a year. So I got home from work this day while my friend was visiting, and she was napping on my couch. I woke her up when I got home, and the first thing she said was, "Where's that man that was here?" And at first I didn't know if she meant RJ. I was like, RJ? Actually, he might have had a job at that point. I think I said something like he either went to work or he had a meeting to go to, something like that. And when I say meeting, I mean AANA, which he was still attending because that adds to a facade that he wanted to keep up. So it was either work or a meeting, but I said, no, RJ went to work or a meeting. And she said, no, there was another man, a shorter guy. He was here too. So I later asked my ex who this person was that was in my home, because while he and I lived there together, because he could not hold down a job and could not hold on to any money that he made through any of his jobs, he was contributing almost nothing to the rent or bills, groceries, the livelihood of either of us. I was really carrying both of us with some help from his parents, who were amazing and lovely people who were just as dumbfounded as me in terms of how to deal with his addiction. But anyway, I asked who this person was that was in my home earlier without my knowledge. And he expressed to me that this person was a guy, and I'll just say the name that he told me because it is definitely not the guy's actual name, but he said, oh, that's Marco. Marco is my friend from a meeting. And at first I thought, that's good. That's good that he's making friends in meetings. Maybe I need to cool it a little bit with how quick I am to get suspicious or frustrated. I said, I'd rather you not bring people into the apartment that I don't know, especially without me knowing about it, and kind of let it go. At which point, my best friend pointed out to me that some money was missing. Not a lot of money, but she had some cash in her pocket that she'd laid on the coffee table while she was taking a nap. It was like $20 or something like that. But when she woke up, the $20 was gone. I started to try to help her look for it. I apologized to her for it because somebody may have taken it while she was asleep. And for some reason, she really did not want to believe that it was RJ or any of RJ's friends. She thought, oh, I must have misplaced it, or maybe your cat knocked it off the table. It's around here somewhere. But in my gut, I really kind of knew that that money didn't just disappear. And furthermore, I don't know how to tell this detail without it sounding disgusting. But that evening when I went to take a shower, there was a bottle in my shower that had previously been empty. And I noticed that there was a liquid in that bottle. And when I went to kind of pick it up and dumped it out, I found that there was human urine in that bottle, which can be used for a number of reasons, particularly for people who are on probation for drug-related matters. Something told me that this Marco, while he may be somebody that RJ met at a meeting, was definitely not somebody that was supporting RJ and his recovery. And I wasn't going to tell the stories of just how nuts this whole episode came to be, but here we are. I might as well just let it all out because I'm not going to tell this story again. But in that same visit, it must have been around Easter. My best friend was visiting, sleeping on the couch. And that next morning, when I woke up, when everybody was awake, I went to talk to my best friend, and she asked me, whatever happened with that stuff that RJ saw last night? And I was so confused. I didn't know what she was talking about. And I think she was kind of out of it because she was still half asleep. But she brought up to me that RJ had woken her up at probably around 4 o'clock in the morning because he saw something out the window in a building across the way. We were about 4 or 5 stories up in my building at the time. And he woke her up at about 4 o'clock in the morning because he had these hallucinations that involved animal sacrifice and children and dancing, all in the name of Easter. And around the time that she said, it was for Easter, I think that's when she really kind of started to wake up and realize that what she was saying sounded crazy, because it was. And I think that was the first time that I started to suspect that if RJ was using again, it wasn't just heroin that he was getting involved in. And going back to the topic of having drug dealers in my home, kind of in the same way that Taylor Nicole Dean talks about having a drug dealer in her home, I'm going to talk more about that towards the end, because it really is at the end of my story and really is the kicker. But yeah, this chapter essentially closes with me coming to the realization that my boyfriend most likely was not only actively abusing drugs, but most likely in abusing drugs other than his drug of choice, which was heroin. And we'll get to that drug in a minute or two. So here, Taylor talks about her ex stealing medication that was intended for her pet. And this makes me angry for so many reasons. Obviously, it made me feel for the pet that needed that medication. It makes me feel for anyone who's had their medication stolen, because that presents a whole new risk for innocent people. And as you may have guessed, I had to deal with that happening to me on more than one occasion. with RJ. So the first time RJ stole my medication, and at that time I was on an anti-anxiety medication. And for some reason, maybe I'm just too trusting, I never thought that he would mess with me, my health, or my livelihood by taking my medication from me. And at this time that this happened, he had admittedly fallen off the wagon. He'd heard of some hack where if he took a certain over-the-counter medication in large quantities, it would emulate the high of heroin just enough to, I guess, to cause the dope sickness to subside. And I remember at the time that he brought that up to me, I was like, okay, fine, do what you gotta do, just get better. And then one day when I went to take my medication, I opened up the pill bottle and noticed that my pills looked different. In fact, they looked exactly like that over-the-counter medication that RJ was taking to help his dope sickness, which may have been the stupidest move he's ever pulled. That made it so obviously clear that he blatantly stole my medication. A medication that I could potentially die from the withdrawals of. So I promptly called my doctor, asked to come see her immediately because this was an emergency situation with my medication. I explained to her that my boyfriend is a drug addict. He stole my medication. I don't know what to do, but I need my medication refilled. And I don't think this will get anyone in trouble. I hope not. But yeah, she was stumped because I don't think either of us wanted to get him in trouble legally, but I needed my medication refilled. So at that time, she wrote me another prescription. And I guess in order to get that approved by the pharmacy, there needs to be a legitimate reason that this medication is being refilled again so soon. So she gave them the reason that I'd lost my medication and that I am a patient she trusts, and I got it refilled fine. Of course, I was very upset, but I was going to be okay in terms of my health and my medication. Until not too long later, my medication went missing again, after he promised it would not happen again. And I knew that if I went to my doctor again to get my medication refilled, I would have to file a police report and file charges against RJ for stealing my medication. So obviously that's what I should have done. I should have done a lot of things different leading up to this point that would not have put me in this situation, but here we are. The thing you have to understand is that when you are in such a close and codependent relationship with an addict, you are sick too. It is so easy in these situations to try to protect the addict in your life from consequences, when that is the one thing they need to experience if there's any hope to get better. But I did not want to be the reason that my boyfriend would go to jail and subsequently end up with more financial troubles, which were already causing a strain on me as it is. So we hatched a plan. He knew where to get drugs downtown, and we made a plan to essentially replace my medication from the black market and to also buy him a medication called Suboxone, which would help him with withdrawals so that he could get clean once again. And I saw him texting this dealer downtown saying that he needed whatever number of pills for me. And I noticed that he asked for something called Tina. And I was so naive at that time. After that exchange, I asked him, what does Tina mean? And he told me, oh, that's what we call your medication in these deals. I didn't think much of it. So with my money, we go downtown. I stand on a seedy street corner as RJ goes into a McDonald's that has people coming and going. There are police right on the curb to buy my medication to replace the medication he'd stolen. Then we move to another corner with my money so that he can buy this other medication to help him get clean, And I ask if I can go with him. He says, no, here, wait in this cafe. All I'm doing is going across the street. I need to talk to this person. Give them the money. They'll go upstairs, come back down, give me my medication, and then we'll go. So I sit in this cafe, probably for upwards of 45 minutes or so, when he said he would be 5 minutes max. And when he comes back, he says, she never came back with my stuff. She took the money and she never came back with the stuff. Seems like this guy has the worst luck ever, right? And I don't remember exactly how that story unfolded, but I'm pretty sure it involved me giving him more money to attempt to get that medication again. So here, Taylor kind of lists off all the things that she gave up for her boyfriend and really gave up to his addiction. And it made me think of all the things I'd given up for RJ. Not just my time, not just my stress, my love. I gave up my money, not just the money that I used to give him to buy the drugs that I thought were going to make him better and right his wrongs. I spent money on replacing phones for him when he lost and broke them. Again, I spent money on keeping him alive, housing him, feeding him. Not only that, I got a phone call from my mom early one morning saying that there was some unusual activity on my bank account because our bank accounts were linked and she was able to see if something kind of crazy was up. And there was. It was 6:30 one morning. And by the time I woke up, my bank account had been zeroed out. And I never had a lot of money in my bank account, but it was something like $600, $700 just wiped from my bank account. It was everything I had, which made me think back to all the times that we were at a CVS or anywhere else that I would use a debit card. And RJ would stand over my shoulder and watch me type in my PIN. And when you are in a relationship with somebody and you live with somebody, you really shouldn't have to feel like you should hide that information from the person. But apparently I should have. So he had my PIN. He took my debit card from my wallet while I was sleeping. And I also noticed that my iPhone had given me all these alerts, essentially the feature that when somebody tries to unlock your phone with multiple failed attempts, your iPhone starts to take screenshots. And I saw that throughout that night, he hadn't slept because in increments of about 15 minutes, all throughout the night, he was attempting to get into my phone. For what? I don't know. So he'd stolen my medication. He'd stolen my money. There was one day that I got home from work, sat down, looked at my bookcase where all my books and movies were and thought something looks off. And I realized that half of my movie collection was gone, which doesn't seem as serious as it is. But if you collect movies and or books, you realize that not only do those things hold monetary value, but there is something personal about the things that you've collected over the years. And he had stolen half of my movie collection to pawn for drug money. And that still stings to this day when I've tried to recover as many of those movies as I could remember, but there are times that I go to watch something and it's not there, which in and of itself is not that painful, but just being reminded that that happened to me, just being dragged back to that place. But I also gave up my health for this guy. Towards the end of the relationship, I noticed that I hurt everywhere. My body just hurt all the time. And I had no energy. I had a really hard time just moving my body throughout the day. So I was seeing all kinds of doctors. I was seeing a chiropractor weekly to try to manage the pain that I was feeling in my back, and really everywhere. I was getting blood work done to see if there was some sort of deficiency that was causing me to be so tired. There was the psychiatry appointments that I needed to keep that became all about him. But more important than my physical health, I gave up my sanity to this guy. And that's something that Taylor also refers to in her video talking about dating Jonny Craig. She said that she would always end up being the one to apologize. And guys, like, that is a real thing that happens in these relationships. I refer to this person in this relationship as the time I lived with a crazy maker. That's what I'll refer to him as. People like him will make you crazy. It's not even him. The person that I saw a very sweet guy, a guy who loved me dearly or wanted to, from a really, really amazing and fantastic family, a guy who was really smart and really kind, but was so sick. He was making me sick in a way that I didn't know I could survive, physically and mentally. And it really started to show in my own behavior. And some of these things are a little bit embarrassing to tell, but this is just what happens. Kind of on the less seemingly serious side, I remember things like being out of town and visiting my family. We went on a trip to Colorado to visit my family out there. We went to visit my brother at CU Boulder. We were there on campus. We decided to go with my brother to the library there. I think just to spend some time with him and while he studied. And he got so disproportionately upset with me over something I don't even really remember. Might have been something like some guy spoke to me, either in person or online, something. I don't even remember. It definitely wasn't anything that was significant to me in any way. It was clear to me later that it really was nothing. I think it was just an opportunity to create a conflict that would allow him to escape. So he got so upset, explosive, and said something like, I just need to go for a walk. I've got to go. And he took off for a couple of hours. I had a hard time finding him. I was embarrassed in front of my family. And I felt crazy. Why was my boyfriend so upset with me when I'd done nothing wrong? So upset that he would run away when we're out of town for hours and not be reachable and embarrass me in front of my family. Now, he never admitted to having run away to go seek drugs, but when we got back from this trip, he'd admitted that he'd relapsed again. It was around this time that it might have actually been around the same time that something happened, either with my medications, my movies. But I kicked him out of the apartment for a couple of days and found out where he'd been staying, which was some apartment complex in a neighborhood that was a bit scary. And I mention that because it comes up again a little later in my story. But it was also around this time that I started to become very suspicious of this Marco person I mentioned earlier in the story, and whether or not RJ was buying drugs from this person, doing drugs with this person. I wasn't sure. And this kind of is to illustrate how crazy I had gotten. I got Marco's phone number from RJ's phone, confided in a coworker that I thought this person might be dealing drugs to my boyfriend. And so this coworker said, hey, I'll text the number, act like I'm interested in buying something and see what the guy says. And my coworker sent a text to this number and said, I need some stuff, can you help me out? And this Marco person responds very quickly, yeah, can you meet me at the fountain in 30 minutes? I clocked out of work and I hauled ass to the fountain. Now, I never found this person. I really didn't know what he looked like. I kind of ended up there and was looking around and scouting the whole area to see if I could find somebody who looked sketchy enough that they may look like they were dealing. I don't know what I thought I was gonna find. The point is that I was going crazy on behalf of this relationship. So going back to me kicking RJ out of the apartment, him staying the night in this sketchy neighborhood, in this sketchy building, I was in talks with his parents about how much I wanted to try to get RJ back into treatment, that I could not handle this anymore. It was driving me nuts. So at this point, I haven't seen RJ in a couple of days, but I have one goal in mind, and that is to get him, put him in a taxi cab, and make our way to the hospital to meet his parents to get him into detox. So I'm texting with him, I'm calling him, begging him to meet up with me. Please, let's make this right. Let's do what we've got to do to get better so that we can be happy, so that we have a chance at having a relationship. I meet up with him on a random sidewalk in our neighborhood, and he promises me that he will go with me to the hospital if we can make a stop at the building he'd been staying at because he left a bag of clothes there. He was doing laundry there. So I say, sure, whatever we've got to do. You got to go get your laundry. Let's go. We'll go pick it up and then we'll go to the hospital. I promised your parents we'd meet them there. We need to make sure whatever we do, we go there. So we head back to this building, and as we show up, he says, you can't come in. These people, they only let people they know in. They will not be happy if you walk into the building. So you need to wait out here. So I had to sit on the street for upwards of 30 minutes. Had people, strangers, yelling at me from their windows. Things like, what are you doing here? So that wasn't a lot of fun. That was pretty scary. Somehow, eventually, he made his way out of the building. We got into a cab and we made our way down to the hospital where we met his parents. He was taken back into the emergency room and we all took turns. His mom, his dad, me, I don't remember if his sister was there. We all took turns kind of going back and speaking with him. The doctor determined that he had definitely done some drugs pretty recently. Even though he'd claimed that it had been a while, the doctor believed that he had done drugs within the past couple of hours, which makes sense, given our little field trip on the way to the hospital. There were points at which he would get belligerent with his own parents, with the doctors, but ultimately he refused to be admitted to the hospital for any sort of detox program. He really just wanted to go home, which the doctor eventually agreed to so long as his family believed that he had a safe place to go home to, which was, to me, he pulled at my heartstrings and made me believe that things were going to turn around when we got home, that he loved me so much for taking such good care of him, that he didn't need to be in the hospital, that we would take care of this on our own. Cut to a couple days later, RJ was out and about one afternoon. I, for the life of me, don't know why, because he wasn't working at that time or that day. I'm not sure which one it was. But something came over me and I decided that I wanted to clean our apartment from top to bottom. I wanted to move furniture and get into every nook and cranny while he was out. So I did. I cleaned everything. And in every hidden corner, in the darkest corner of his closet, in a little slot under another door in the closet, I found a burnt spoon and a syringe. Under the bed, another syringe. In the bathroom, on top of the medicine cabinet, another syringe, another burnt spoon, a little cap from a syringe that had some residue in it. And I thought, here we go, Alicia, like, if it wasn't clear enough to you that this guy is using and is not going to quit no matter what effort you put into it, this is it. But I knew that if I called him out on it, if I showed him what I found, he would claim that it was old. I knew he would. So what I decided to do was to take what little money I had, I went to CVS and I got a drug testing kit. And at this point, I think this is when all my senses started to come to me. I knew that he was not a pot smoker. I got a 4-panel test that tested for THC, cocaine, opiates, and meth. And I suspected that he would test positive for 3 of the 4. Oh, I didn't mention, if you guys hadn't figured out, this code name Tina that RJ used earlier in the story was code for meth, which explained the hallucinations and a lot of other behavior. So here I was after months of my own health fading, of running around and spinning my wheels to help save this person. I think I just started to come to a moment of clarity, and I knew exactly what was in front of me, and I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and I knew exactly what this drug test would reveal should he take it. And I think most people that have been in this situation, living with a drug addict, they've probably heard the same spiel over and over again. If you think I'm using, then I'll take a drug test. I'll take a drug test. Test me. Then you'll see. I'm not afraid to take a test. I'd heard that so many times throughout our relationship, so I thought, okay, he's told me that he'll let me test him, I'm gonna get a test. So, given that my bank account had recently been emptied out, I did not have much money in my account, but I figured, this is worth the $45 in my account to go buy this test. If it's going to give me a concrete answer to justify a big decision that I may have to make. I get home, I text him, I need you to come home now. And he did. He came home pretty quickly. When he showed up, I had the drug test in my hand and I said, I need you to take this right now. And he acted nonchalant. He was like, okay, sure, no problem. He went into the bathroom, closed the door, and I said, no, I need you to open the door. I need you to do this with the door open. Which made him angry, but what's he gonna do? So he opened the door, he took the test, and as it's developing, I see that it's starting to show testing positive for cocaine, positive for opiates, positive for methamphetamines. And that's when it started, the excuses. No, I haven't taken anything since 2 weeks ago, right after our trip to Colorado. Something's wrong with this test. Mind you, these are all drugs that exit the system within something like 72 hours, on top of the fact that this guy had a super fast metabolism. So these drugs had to have been in his body very recently. And yet he was trying to convince me that I was wrong, the test was wrong. And once again, I started to feel myself going crazy, because you start to think, could he be right? I want to believe him. And I don't think somebody who loves me so much would lie so blatantly to me. But there's concrete proof here. What do I do with this? And just at that time, while we're going through this exchange, I hear my doorbell ring, which is kind of like an intercom system where somebody was ringing the doorbell from 4 flights down. And as we're arguing, going back and forth, I hear the doorbell and I stop and I go, who is that? And I remember him saying, it's nobody, don't worry about it. And I thought, okay, whatever, because we were dealing with something. And then another minute goes by and I hear the doorbell ring again, at which point I thought, something's up. So I ditched whatever conversation we were having and I put on my shoes and I ran downstairs outside. And outside, I see 2 guys, one who was very intoxicated. They're at my doorstep, 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, holding my handbag that I didn't realize was missing, but had been in my closet. And I go downstairs and I ask, who are you guys? And they said, does RJ live here? I know who these people are. I said, yeah, I know him, but he doesn't live here anymore. And I meant that. I meant as soon as that test came up positive and I saw these guys at my doorstep, I knew that RJ did not live there anymore. So these guys went on about these checks that RJ had written them or their guy that had bounced, which I felt so stupid because I was the person who said, you have to stop paying me rent when he did pay some rent. You got to stop paying me rent in cash because then I need to take it to the bank. You need to, like an adult, open a bank account and get a checkbook so that you can write me checks for rent. So I was the person who convinced this guy to get a checkbook that he treated as free money to drug dealers that somehow accepted checks. I told them that I don't know anything about these checks, what the deal is with that, but can I please have my bag back? That is my bag. At which point they say to me, no, you can't have this bag back. This is collateral for these checks that RJ wrote that are bad. And then they proceeded to try to explain to me what collateral is. But anyway, so I said to them, now, this was not an expensive bag. It wasn't super cheap. It was an $80 bag from ModCloth. But just for the sake of making a point, I said to them, what is my $30 bag going to do for collateral? Which angered them. And one of the guys said, $30? This guy told me that this bag was worth $300, which is just kind of hilarious, actually. So yeah, these guys proceeded to tell me that they need to find RJ, that he needs to pay them the money he owes them. But if he can't pay them, then I'm gonna have to pay them, because it doesn't matter where the money comes from, but their guy who's right up the road needs his money, and their guy doesn't care if my lights stay on next month because he needs to be paid. So essentially they're threatening me and saying that I need to foot RJ's bill, or else this guy right up the street is going to be very unhappy with me. So, I was trying to stay pretty tough, but I cracked. I started to feel a couple of tears run down my face, at which point I think I made these guys a little uncomfortable, or maybe made them feel bad. So one of them started to hug me, trying to comfort me and telling me not to cry. And then the other guy got on one knee and said that he would give me a blessing. I am not making this up. Like, this is so bananas. The other guy got on his knee and said, here, I'll give you a blessing. He's holding my hand. And saying some sort of drunken prayer, while the other guy has his arms wrapped around my shoulders, and I'm so incredibly uncomfortable and crying at this point. And like I said, it is 4:00 on a Wednesday, so people are walking through my busy neighborhood on their way home from work. One guy stops, asks if I'm okay. I said to him, I just need these guys to get away from me. At which point the guy who was blessing me got very angry that somebody would interrupt his blessing, started shouting all kinds of expletives at this good Samaritan who was trying to help me for dare interrupting his blessing. And the guy who offered to help was either attempting to call the police or was pretending to, which was enough to scare these drug dealers off. So they took off running. Thank God. And it just so happens at that point, RJ came downstairs and outside. And as soon as I saw him, I said, your dealers ran that way, you better run that way. And he took off. And that was how my relationship ended. I did see him a couple of days later when I had packed all of his belongings into a couple duffel bags. And he stopped by with his family to pick up his stuff before heading off to treatment. I was pretty bitter at that point still. I wasn't happy to see him. But I hoped that he would get better. From what I understood, he did do better for some time. And then over the years, I've seen him come and go from my neighborhood. I can tell he's strung out. At times, I thought he looked homeless. And I don't mean by his appearance, I mean by the fact that he was sleeping on the sidewalk. I've gotten pocket dial voicemails that were pretty incriminating and let me know that he is still losing the fight against his addiction. And yeah, there's no happy ending to this story other than the fact that I am out of that relationship. Whenever I do encounter this person, it will send me into a state of panic. It gives me flashbacks to those times, and that sucks. That just passing somebody on the street can cause my body to go into a state of shock over something that ended 6 years ago. But I will say that although I was terrified in my own home for a while after that last encounter in our apartment as we were breaking up, yeah, I was afraid. I stayed inside with the doors locked for a few days, and slowly came to grow more comfortable coming and going. But all the problems, all the physical problems, medical problems I was having just lifted. And I finally got a chance to be happy. It sucks that I gave almost a year of potential happiness to this person, where I could have been devoting all that time, energy, money, etc. towards investing in myself and my life and my happiness. But there are plenty of life lessons that I took from this experience. And at the end of the day, I was doing my best. And memories like that, just like memories of my own active addiction, really do remind me of how I once had it, which ultimately makes me appreciate what I have now all the more. I know we don't always have to find the silver linings in these things, but I have a tendency to. So that's all to say that in hearing Taylor Nicole Dean's stories about not only her addiction, but her relationship as it was tied to addiction, there was so much there that I saw as 100% valid. 100%. I know what this girl was going through. In my own way, of course. She had her experience, I had mine. I know people tend to want to compare their pain to other people's and say who had it harder. I'm sure in many ways she had it tougher than I did, and in many ways I had it tougher than she did. I don't care to compare stories in that way. This is all just to say that I heard her story and I heard it as something very valid and painful. I'm so happy for her that she is out of that relationship and on the road to recovery. At the end of the day, that's the most important part of these stories, is that we are out of these relationships and we are in sobriety, we are healthy, and we are wiser than we were when we were in these situations. So I'm gonna stop rambling now. But to those of you who did recommend that I check out Taylor Nicole Dean, thank you so much. I was so happy to have found her. I was riveted by her stories. I can't wait to go back and watch more, learn more about her stories. I will probably be diving a little bit more into the drama that a couple of people have mentioned, to see if there is anything that I'd have to say about that. I'm very interested to know what's happened since all this. I'm interested to see where she takes her content now that she's sober. It seems like she's going to be doing more content that is centered around mental health and sobriety, which is something to be celebrated. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for the recommendation. Thank you to anyone who stuck with this video this long. I'm talking about you, the one person who's not me that's watching this. Thank you for sticking around this long. Thank you for listening to my story. Of course, that is just one blip on the radar in terms of stories that tied to addiction in my life. So if you guys want, I may tell more stories about my experiences, more stories about my own addiction, my own experience in treatment, my own experience getting sober. But I may keep it a little bit lighter for the next couple of videos, just to make sure that I'm not wearing myself thin. But I am really happy to have gotten this off my chest. I'm eager to hear what you guys think. If you've gone through something similar, if you're going through something similar, please know that there are people out there who have been through this, who have some really good insight that can really support you, and offer a helping hand. I think anybody who's been through something like this would drop everything to help somebody else get out of a situation like this. So if that happens to be you, please reach out. I'm here, and I'm sure a lot of people in your life are there. So yeah, whether you're that person or somebody else, just somebody with an opinion or just somebody that wants to say hi, hey, just meet me in the comments. I'll see you there. Bye.